lovely listeners around the world, and more specifically in Asia. Now, that's a wonderful topic. We've got 12 months exactly. We're at the cusp of the end of the year, cusp of a new year. What's hot in Asia? And the first question that I'm going to throw over, we've actually got a fairly good mix. Ray, who's from outside Asia, Bruce Wells, who's technically in Australia, but seems to know a lot more for China. So Bruce, that's your representation. Who's of course from Australia. Greg, who lived in Bangkok and has now moved into Singapore, which also is the hub for all things Asian. So the first question over to you for 2014. Do you think the war between technology or methodology is over? And if not, what's going to be hot? Is it going to be a technology thrust, or is it going to be again back to the basic methodology that's going to be hot? That's the first focused question for you. That's for all of you. So who wants to go first?
Okay, Pravin, I can't resist the temptation. So Ray here. It is going to be a war because there's some very curious things going on. I'm seeing a lot of technology presentations with some fantastic technology like Google Glass and some of the 3D stuff on smartphones, but most of the research that those people are being drawn towards is often very simple, I wouldn't say stupid research, but you know what I mean. And so we look at that on the one hand, and then we look at the sort of the beautiful research that Orm was talking about a moment ago, and they are miles apart. We look at the behavioral economics that we had a presentation on in the previous session, which is looking at great innovations about method. And we see that there is this conflict, that people are coming along with really big solutions, clever mobile solutions, integrated technologies, deep mining of social media, which are all technology driven, but often really quite dumb research. And then on the other hand, we're getting some people coming along with some really great new methods, but often not having the technology to put those together. So that'll be interesting.
I'm going to chip in there, Ray. I think it's time to call a halt to the war. We need to take the best of what we've got of technology and use our methods smarts to put some validation behind those, so we're going forward with a marriage of the best.
I do remember, Ray, was it, gosh, it's probably, it feels like 5 years ago, it was probably 10 years ago in Singapore when you stood up and you confidently predicted the end of the traditional survey. And in a recent post on Green Book, you said, look, sorry, you know, rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated, and it looks like we're still doing, you know, hundreds of thousands of traditional surveys for a whole host of reasons. So, you know, we're not exactly automating the process. There's still a bit of old school, you know, pen and paper stuff being done, and the odd, you know, kind of intercept interview and door-to-door survey, of course, being done in many markets in Asia Pacific. So I thought that was an interesting prediction that didn't quite pan out.
Right. As with the prediction that Ray often quotes, Reg Baker, who's had this blog that from 2001 on, every year has been the year of the mobile, and it's yet to happen. So I would take a break there. Now, a question over to you, Bruce. This is very specific to India and China, but also including Indonesia here, in terms of not just internet usage, but also the fact that these countries that I mentioned have the world's youngest population, but by 2014, these countries will also have the world's oldest population, purely in terms of numbers. So do you think that is going to bring about a change in the world of research, the way we look at things?
Yeah, Pravin, you were directing that question to me, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
Bruce. Yeah. Yeah, so actually I was going to answer to the first question about the changes in technology, and I was going to talk about...
Go ahead.
Well, no, I can kind of link them together. Because you know, I see that one of the big change. First off, I agree with Sue that I think it's not so much about is it the methodology or the technology. It's about linking this together and leveraging technology appropriately to for the methodology that we need. But the big change I see in the next upcoming years is going to be around mobile. and what that's going to do in terms of introducing in situ event-driven activities and really creating, I think, some also passive data collection and a lot of the things that the mobile world will introduce to the research landscape that currently isn't really available. And to link it to the question you just said, I think markets like Indonesia, China, India, where vast percentages of the population are accessing the internet on a regular basis using their mobile devices, we'll see a lot of innovation there. We'll see a lot of opportunities, I think, to get closer to consumers than we've ever had in the past.
Good. I'll now pull Greg in. Greg, you've got those 2 questions and 3 comments.
Well, I was also fascinated to read the other day that one of the key researchers in Google say that they quite often use snail mail to send out invitations to people to make telephone appointments to interview them. I thought, well, yeah. So there's a bit of old school market research and that's still going. So I mean, I'm always fascinated to see on behalf of the dinosaur research department, how some of the old school techniques are still alive and well. And I don't know. I guess it really does depend to who we're talking about. And I think one of the trends that's definitely going to happen, and it's already happened, as far as researchers are concerned, is that clients now want to speak to people and have them run their projects, regardless of the methodology and the technology or whatever. They just need people who understand their businesses well, right? And I guess traditionally research all started off in Asia, 30, 40 years ago in most markets with FMCGs, when everybody knows how to use toothpaste and they're familiar with bars of soap and Coca-Cola and and Heineken beer. So you didn't really need to have much expertise. But when you're starting to get into areas of that require far more specialist knowledge, and it could be wholesale banking or stock exchange work, or or interest groups that are difficult to reach in any other way than like the sort of uber wealthy, right? The ultra high net worth individuals and stuff, and talk about private banking or something like that. It's a completely different skill set. So it's hard to think, well, we're going to approach these with an online community or an online focus group or a telephone survey. It simply won't work. So I think there's it depends on what subjects and what audiences you're trying to reach. So as Sue said, I think it's horses for courses. All this new technology is fantastic. It's just knowing what is the best mix of tools to use and apply them judiciously.
Lovely, Greg. Now I'm going to take one of your sentences when you said that the clients don't care about the technology methodology, they want to do it themselves. And that's the question I'm throwing over to all of you. I think that elephant, at least the rest of the world, I chaired a panel discussion 2 weeks ago and folks were blissfully unaware of the DIY wave. Now, the question to you is, do you think it's going to heat up a little bit? And I'm talking about the DIY wave specific to Asia. Do you think it's going to heat up? It's still going to be a fad, or people are just going to throw it under the blanket?
Oh, I think it's definitely eaten into a lot of of traditional research company business. I mean, there's a lot of surveys and consultations that we would have done, a few years ago before SurveyMonkey, that they just wouldn't have even attempted it themselves. And now, they're going straight to a panel company, or they're using their own database and emailing everybody. So yeah, I mean, there's literally hundreds of projects or clients, say even in a small market like Singapore, who would be doing DIY now and cutting us out of the equation entirely. They just don't see the value, for $1,000 they do it themselves, or they're paying $50,000 to have an agency do it. I mean, it's, for most of them, it's a no-brainer. It may not be perfect, but it'll, in terms of cost benefits, it's just it's no decision to make at all. So I think that's been a really big threat to us, on the agency side.
Bruce, have you faced any heat with respect to DIY communities?
Yeah, actually, I guess the philosophy that we've got at Vision Critical is we're trying to, I guess, link the two together. And what I mean by that is I think our most successful communities is where we've got the agency, so either one of our partners or in some markets we actually have a full serve offering, but where the agencies are involved in supporting the research activities on the community, as well as giving the platform, giving access to the platform to the client themselves. So, and to us, that's where we kind of get, I think, the best synergies. So for quick research, for some of the more, let's call it, basic activities that need to be done that maybe don't need the horsepower and the sophistication of an agency, empower the brands to be able to do that on their own, but still still within the same ecosystem, so the agencies can still be involved in supporting the more strategic and more, let's call it, complex activities that need to take place. So I guess our philosophy isn't kind of one or the other. It's trying to create an opportunity for both to sit harmoniously together.
Right. Sue and Ray, I have a slightly the same topic for a slightly twisted question. Now, given the fact that DIY wave is catching on, even in Asia, from what Greg says, don't you think our job then is more to aid and assist and make sure that the requisite training or academic state of preparation is there for either younger entrants or people jumping into DIY research? Sue, Ray, thoughts?
I was going to let Ray jump in first because he actually has recently presented a paper at the SMR Fall Conference that was addressing that. I mean, I think very much if we sort of go with the trusted partner model, we can work with our clients in whatever way we best add value for them. So whether that's around, like providing training, providing advice on questionnaire design, providing help with technology, if we're there working with them, we can add value where they need us to add value, as opposed to us deciding, like where the value is added. And I mean, I think probably at the AMSTRS conference in Australia in September, people were commenting that there were more and more clients attending the conference as opposed to just agency side people. So sometimes kind of that distinction between a client side researcher and an agency side researcher isn't necessarily helpful, because somebody can be these days performing the role of a market researcher, but they're sitting inside a company. So there's probably a little bit of a mindset adjustment too about drawing that line between the two as well.
And I was holding back because Sue is co-author of a book that SMR has produced, which is Answering Contemporary Market Research Questions. It's essential that those of us who care about research, which is everybody on this call and hopefully everybody listening to this session, actually writes down, codifies, produces training courses, produces webinars to say, this is the right way to do it, this is the wrong way to do it, here's what happens if you do it right, here's what happens if you do it wrong. There's some fantastic stuff now up in the library that we've produced that Greg talked about earlier to help do that, because I think the share of DIY that will happen in Asia is much, much smaller than the share that will happen in North America, but it will still be billions of dollars worth of DIY going on, and we absolutely need people to have the right ammunition. And the thing I've always found about training people is that if you go in and you train somebody, then when they go beyond the simple stuff, they're going to come back to you to say, right, we've got something a bit more difficult now, could you help us with this? So training people does not actually get rid of your work. It simply means that you work on the more exciting, the more fun, the more stretching stuff.
Right. Thanks, Ray and Sue. I'm going to feed off on that question, and this is for Bruce and Greg. And if my audio is not clear, please shout out. That is the role of a researcher changing? And let's talk about the absolute near term, the next 12 months. Are we going from hardcore researchers agency side to research consultants? There was a question that was tweeted to ORM before. How do we avoid biases from their own cultural background when doing research, for example, semiotic analysis? So even if the client is jumping into DIY, do you think there is a role for a researcher to morph as a research consultant, research advisor? Do you think there is a possibility in the next 12 months, or it's going to take more? Greg, Bruce?
Well, I mean, this is a bit of a perennial question. I think you know, we've had our traditional business, we've seen it erode in many areas, and DIY has definitely been the case. And I think there's now a greater, you know, with this whole agile research movement and stuff, where people are going, look, if it's 70% of a quality job, but we're getting it for nothing and we're getting it really, really quickly, then do we have to spend, you know, months and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it to be 100% correct? Now, there are some clients that are going to insist on it. You know, I mean, if you're going to have a government-linked company publishing data in Singapore, you know, it has to be absolutely perfect, right? It's got to be 110%. It can't be 70%. But I think most commercial clients are quite happy with 70% now, so that will continue. We've got a lot of companies now with in-house researchers or people that know enough about research to go straight to a panel provider and get get the data and make, you know, some sort of sense out of it. I think our role now has really got to be as industry experts, as well as, you know, coming in when that 100% quality is required. So, you know, it's definitely a threat to the easy business, and I think researchers now have not only got to have an even wider sort of toolkit to be able to, if necessary, fake it for a while until they find someone to bring in on the team to get the job done. Right. And I mean, I've been guilty of that one myself. You know, you've got to find an expert in gambling research, which is a really narrow niche subject. But you either know that or you don't. But you've got time to go and find that person and bring them into the team. So I think there's certain flexibility and entrepreneurship that will get most consultancies through. But, you know, definitely we have to get paid for the thinking now and not the data, not the field work, which is when I came to Asia in the 70s, I mean, you know, you gave the thinking away, right, and you charged for field work, and that was the model. So, you've just got to alter the way you sell and have your value perceived. So I think, you know, there's plenty of ways we'll all survive. I mean, another interesting point, I mean, and this is just, say, applying to Singapore, I know that there's a couple of great independent consultants who have actually had their employment passes pulled because they aren't doing the turnover that the government considers worthwhile. And there's a bit of a political backlash here about, you know, foreigners taking jobs from, you know, that could be taken by young graduates. So now they don't want any low-cost expatriate, what they call foreign talent, which is usually inverted commas and often in the blogs is a pejorative term, coming in and not doing the turnover. So we've had a few great people we've used as consultants, young kids that are very bright, but they don't have an employment pass anymore. It's hard to employ them if you're not a big company. There's ratios on locals versus foreigners. And some of them are either leaving or they're being forced to take jobs with the bigger companies. So there's another little sort of small trend. It's only happening in Singapore, but you know it may go elsewhere as well.
If I just add to that, I fully agree with what Greg said. And I'll just highlight the one thing you mentioned about the financial model changing. To me, that's kind of the underlying change here. Is that no longer is it about making revenue and margin on data collection and field work. It now is much more about, I guess, clients paying for thinking, experience, and expertise. And so, yeah, to me, that's what I see as the fundamental change is that the financial model that underpins the agencies is going to continue to evolve.
Lovely. So what we've done over the last 30 minutes is to cover the 3 T's in terms of what's hot, which is technology, training in various forms, as well as transfers of resources, personnel, which might also include the entire technology part of crowdsourcing it. Now, the one question that I'm going to ask all of you is, in your opinion, the next 12 months, what do you think is going to be really hot in Asia, specific to research? It could be a technology trend, training or transfers, whatever we discussed, but one hot thing.
Ray here. I'll kick off, and I'm going to steal one from something that Bruce said earlier, and it might not be 2014. My predictions aren't always exactly right on the year. Thank you for reminding me, Greg. But the whole world is becoming more and more and more American. If you look at all the social media that's used, it's all American. All the websites are used, it's American, except China. 400 million people using WeChat. All those Chinese social media sites, they are going to come out like a river at some point, like an absolute dam burst, and they're going to change, first of all, Southeast Asia, and then the whole of the internet world, and that's going to have a really big impact on research. Just as the water comes rushing past us, it won't be meant for us. It'll simply change the environment. And when Taobao and all of these other things, QQ.com, burst out of China, it's going to have such an enormous impact because the user bases are 400 million, 500 million already, a billion. It's going to be such a big impact.
Lovely, Ray. Greg,
I'm just happy that we've got through this without mentioning big data.
I was consciously keeping it out.
Thanks, Greg.
Or behavioural economics. Where the hell's that?
So are you going to leave us with those two words, Greg?
Oh, look, I'm going to leave that to the big brains here to deal with the with BE and Big D, man. I'm a micro data specialist, I'm afraid.
Yes, please.
I was going to say, mine might be a bit more of a wish list than a prediction, but I'm going to say implementation, and I think it'd be nice to see in 2014, instead of papers about where the future's going and maybe we could do this, that we start to see people really coming out and saying, this is how we're using mobile, this is how we're using big data, and giving us some really practical examples of how they're putting these new technologies, you know, out into the field, how they're working with clients on them. So I'm hoping for implementation in 2014. And possibly some integration where we start to, we often talk about all these new things in isolation from each other, but we start to see us, you know, pulling things like social media and text analytics together a bit more, putting mobile and, you know, like sort of some of the other things that it can go with together. And so we start implementing and integrating.
Lovely, Sue, which also proves that we always go in cycles, because the first part of your answer, you said we need to come out and talk a lot more about what we're doing, which is pretty much what Greg said, that in the 70s it was giveaway knowledge free. So it's coming back. And Bruce?
Yeah, well, of course, Ray took the one that I mentioned about, I think we're going to see some export of IT from China, which will be quite exciting to see. And again, I do believe this area of mobile, we'll see some great innovation around that, especially kind of using location-based services, in situ, event-driven stuff. I think we'll see some exciting innovation in the mobile space.
Lovely. We've got a fairly good mix, and I'm pretty certain that things are already heating up with a whole lot of folks looking at Asia, to the extent of some of my researcher friends are actually starting to learn Mandarin. So good luck to all of them. This is the future. It's really hot and heating up. And with that, I would close this panel discussion. Thank you all for your thoughts. And over to you, Ray.